we now have some particles moving around how we want, but it's just a bit boring them just moving in a straight line. So I'm going to show you how to get, say, gravity to affect the particles. So first thing I normally do is come into objects and create a new object. I'm now going to call this object gravity, or just grav for short. Okay, and now we're going to want to come into our thinking particles settings to create a particle group, so just the p-storm particles are affected. So you do this by coming into simulation, thinking particles, and thinking particle settings. You'll then notice particle groups. You then want to right click this and press add. You then have group 1. Okay. So now we have that. We then go back into the Xpresso editor, and we do that by clicking the Xpresso tag, well, double clicking. And now we go to the output of the p-storm generator and click particle birth. And this will be this will just tell it what happens at particle birth. Okay, so we now want to add a new node to this. So we do this by right clicking and then going to new node, then go to thinking particles, and then go TP standard, and then go to TP dynamic and add P gravity. Now click P gravity, so you get the parameters in the attributes again, and drag your gravity null object into the object tab parameter in the attributes of gravity. And if we now try to link particle birth and gravity, you'll find that it will not have any effect whatsoever on the particles if we just do this. And also you'll find that the null object turns into like a square with like an arrow, and this is just to demonstrate what direction the gravity is in. So if we now go to start, you'll see that it's having no effect on the particles whatsoever, and that's because you can't link gravity or any dynamic straight with the generator of the particles. You have to, as such, drag the particles out of the generator into a group, and then back in into a group, and then back out, and then link that with gravity. And you do this by creating a new node, and then come into thinking particles, and then go to TP standard and P group, and that stands for particle group. Okay, so you now want to tell these particles to belong to group 1 and not all, so the gravity will only affect group 1 and not all the particles within. And then you then link the output port particle birth with the input port of group 1. Okay, so we now create a new node. Again, we do this by right clicking, new node, thinking particles, and then I believe it is TP initiator and P pass, or particle pass. And we then tell P pass to get group 1, and we do this by clicking it, and then in the parameter it will have group, and you drag group 1 into that. And you then link P pass and the group 1 port with P gravity and the grav port. And if we now link that and we play, you'll see the particles are having gravity affect them. You can't see it that much because gravity isn't that strong. So if you go into if you click P gravity and go into the attributes, and you put it on to, like, say 1000. More than that. Okay. Then drop it over there and start again. And you'll see the particles are now falling from gravity. So this effect looks just boring, however it could be used for a variety of situations, but this just looks a tad bit boring, and there's a lot of cool settings you can use in P Gravity, and one of these is the type, and you can change the type from planar to spherical. And if we now play this, you'll see that the P Gravity would update to a sphere as such, and the particles will be dragged in towards the sphere and then sort of like dragged out again and then back in. So it's kind of how, say, like the sun, like how the planets rotate around the sun and like orbit as such. It's probably the best way I could describe it. So if we just move our gravity along, and the particles aren't living long enough for us to actually see the effects, so if we just crank the life up to say 250, I don't know, I say 90, and we drag the speed, we turn the speed down just a little bit, and we turn the count down so it's not as crazy. And if we now just look and watch, you'll see it happening. So you'll see that like the particles are getting sucked in, and like they're kind of like rotating around the sphere or orbiting the sphere as such. And if we move these away, you'll see that the particles will follow it. I don't know if you can see that. And it creates a really cool effect. And there's lots and lots and lots of things you can do with this. So I'm just gonna mess around with the settings now and see what I can make that looks pretty cool. So if I stop that now, and I just tune the gravity back down to about 1,000 rather than 10,000 because it's a bit mad. And then we go into the particles, crank the count up to 100, put the X fob and the Y fob on to say 360. And okay, so let's see what happens now. And let's just drag the gravity a bit further away and drag it up a bit. Okay, see what happens now. So we just play. Particles still aren't living long enough, so if we go back into Xpresso and maybe tune up the speed again, sorry, it's back to 1,000, and let the particles live for 250 frames, and let's see what happens now. That's a lot better. You get this really crazy effect, and you can see that whenever the particles get close to the gravity, they kind of get like slingshotted, and that could not be what you want. You might want all the particles to be a certain speed, and to do this, it's pretty easy. And you do this by going back into your Xpresso editor and right clicking, new node, thinking particles, back into dynamic, and you then go into P velocity. And you now just link P velocity with group 1, with the output port group 1 to the import into P velocity called particle. And if you click P velocity, you come up with the parameters in the attributes menu, and you'll see a couple of settings. If you want to keep the speed on a certain speed, you want to change the parameter to speed and the evaluation type to replace, and put the speed on, say, 100, so you'll be able to see a difference. So if we just play that now, you see that the particles are always moving at 100 no matter what. And if you crank this up to 1,000, they will always move at 1,000, and no matter what happens, it will always be at 1,000. So it's sort of a limit as such to how fast the particles can move. And you should see that you still have one particle geometry that isn't moving, and that's because it's the object that you told the geometry to be, but this obviously isn't part of the actual particle group or any of the particles that are moving, so it looks quite odd with all the particles going rather crazy, and you just have this one cube or whatever object you've got just there. So there's a couple of ways to get around this, and one way is just to come up into the objects menu, and if I zoom in there, you'll see these dots, like these two dots, one above the other. If you just double click both of them, you'll see that the cube vanishes, and that just deactivates the cube in. The top one is the renderer, and the bottom one is, the top one is the editor, and the bottom one is the renderer, I believe. And that just deactivates them, and thus making it invisible. Yeah, these cubes are a bit boring actually, so I'm going to swap this out for a sphere. Just scale it down a bit. And go into P shape, and replace the sphere with the cubes, and just delete the cube. That looks a lot better now. Better than the cubes, I suppose. So I hope you guys enjoyed this thinking particle tutorial. So hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want more Xpresso and thinking particle tutorials, or any other tutorials as such, just comment below and I'll pick a couple and make some tutorials on them. So that's all that needed to be said. I'll see you later then, guys. Peace.